Welcome to the Middle Tech Spotlight Series, where we highlight entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem supporters that are building our startup ecosystem. We've been talking to founders consistently over the last 4 years, and we want to use this series to keep tabs on the companies being built here. Today, we're talking with Matthew Sunday of The Core, being built in California, Kentucky. The Core specializes in bringing ideas and concepts to reality for the DoD and other high-stakes organizations. Before diving in, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with them. All right, Matt Sunday, welcome to the Middle Tech Spotlight Series.
Thank you.
Glad to have your early morning recording for us.
Yes, it is.
Which is fun. I was joking with Evan after we talked to you on the phone and kind of like saying what your role is kind of like. And I was like, he's like the Q character in James Bond. I know it's your whole group that does it, but yes. You work on some cool stuff is how I want to preface the whole conversation.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough to have evolved to that point where it's like some of the neatest things walk through the door and you don't ever know what's coming next. So
yeah, well let's start with just a high level, like when you're meeting somebody new, how do you describe what you do?
So historically, that was one of the tougher questions to answer because it was never just a single thing. But at this point, it's kind of, and I'm going to coin a phrase from a previous coworker. I can't take credit for it, but we've basically distilled it down to, we're professional problem solvers. So it's independent of the technology. It's independent of the problem that you have. And as you highlighted, we do a lot of work for the DoD, a high stakes community. We're really working closer to the warfighter than we are for the big picture type stuff, or not big picture, but big program type stuff. So, we're not going to build you the new airplane, but we may solve a problem that exists for the end user at the point of impact. And so that's a lot of the stuff that we touch at this point.
Yeah, and we'll dig into more of what that actually looks like and what that actually means, how the company actually does that.
Right.
But let's dive into your background first, because you got a very interesting background that it makes a lot of sense that you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So just kind of start us off. Out of high school, you ended up enlisting in the Marines. Correct. Take us from there.
Okay. So out of high school, enlisted in the Marines. From there, one of the things I was able to leverage was a GI Bill. My grandfather was a firefighter. When I got back from infantry school, he said, go take a firefighter exam. It's like, I don't want to take a firefighter exam. I'm going to college. Well, I took the exam while I was at MP school down in Alabama. I was contacted. They offered me a job. I said, no, I'm going to college. And they said, we'll work with you on college and we'll pay you to be a fireman. I weighed that out, came back, decided to move forward with it. I knew I could always step away if I wanted to, and ended up spending almost 30 years in the police and fire service combined. So they held true to their word. They worked with me. It was a great department. I was able to earn undergraduate and graduate degrees in mechanical engineering. That about midway through my career, I started leveraging part-time. Now that I've transitioned out, meaning retired from the fire service, I'm now a full-time engineer. So we do consulting, go after programs of our own, and things like that. So it's a non-traditional path to becoming an engineer. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't consider myself an engineer as much as I am an innovator, which is a word that's almost used too much. And that's where we kind of lead to, and we'll get to later, where I consider us to be kind of concept refinement specialists. Independent of what you bring forward, we'll assemble the right team to be able to solve your problems.
And I want to talk about like how that transition actually came about to being this concept refinement, specialist, becoming more of an engineer that you're focusing on full time. I think it's really cool that, the common thread throughout your career, all of those are very high stakes professions that you're involved in. It's a lot of life and death situations and a lot of situations like that. And I'm sure through that, being able to combine your background in engineering with the problems that you encountered in your day-to-day at each of those professions kind of led you towards the core.
That's true.
So talk about how that transition actually happened. Like what was it that you were seeing that made you say, okay, I think I want to start this type of company?
Okay. So traditional, one of my first companies that I worked with when I was working part-time with them, I was still a fireman, still a part-time police officer at that point in time. And I had the opportunity to then work with a bunch of other engineers. So I'd been working a very blue-collar world, okay, transitioning into a very white-collar world. And what I realized where the holes existed was I had some incredible technologists, but they had never had their boots on the ground. They'd never been dirty. They'd never been gritty. The people they were working for and trying to innovate for, they'd never walked in those shoes. That was a hole. And that hole is the one that I filled. I may not have been the best mechanical engineer that ever walked in the room. However, I could get end users to speak to me because I'd done the same thing that they've done. I stood those posts. I went through scenarios and situations very similar to what they live, and understanding their problem, again, at that point of impact allows us to engineer better solutions. So as we march through time, you end up identifying other technologists or whatnot that are very diverse in capabilities, like-minded and whatnot, and you slowly collect those people, those talents over time, which then has culminated to what has become the core. And it really is, it's a team environment. It's an assembly of folks that are really leveraged appropriately to solve problems. So if they're relevant for it, they get brought in, and then we march forward to kind of reach a conclusion for the customer.
And I think that's such an important part of entrepreneurship, and it's a theme that we hear a lot on this podcast when we talk to entrepreneurs, being very involved in the problem that they set out to solve.
Right.
Having those boots on the ground, that direct experience with whatever problems that you're trying to solve is invaluable as an entrepreneur. You almost have to have that to really have that passion, have that understanding, have that expertise in what you're doing. And let's get into kind of really digging into what the core does, how it functions, all of that sort of thing. Maybe let's start by just talking about an example of a project that you guys have worked on, one that would be a good example to talk about, and then we'll use that example to kind of talk about how it came to be, what your involvement was in it, that sort of thing.
Okay, so we have a variety of programs. So let me give you kind of the breadth of the things that we can touch, because I don't know if I've said it yet or not, but technology agnostic. It's like, so this is, we will function and engage in space independent of a specific area of expertise. So if you're an electronics company, you're really good at this, or a software company, you're really good at that. At the end of the day, we engage on all levels and basically bring in the right people to help fill that void. So one of the early programs that we had was a customer came to me and they needed a custom calibration machine for like a torque tester is basically what it's called. But they needed to torque test something at like 20,000 foot-pounds. It's like that doesn't exist in a way that it is cheap and easy and whatnot. But the customer had an idea. I've got an idea. I think it should look like this. I think it should function like this. And it was literally on a napkin. That's what he handed me. And so we transitioned that over, and at the end of the day, we took something that took him days to test certain equipment to hours. And it was a very small investment, and that really is what spawned this idea of bringing in the right type of people, assembling them for these type of programs, to drill down and give those individual solutions. But that's really evolved at this point to being programs that have worked on for the DoD, patient transport platforms, evolving from what you saw on TV in Vietnam with the typical, 2 sticks and canvas, which are still used today. It's evolved now to being lightweight aluminum and like a plastic mesh. But how do you actually transport people in ground fixed and rotary wing vehicles in a way that you're not making the injuries worse? How do you stop? How do you prevent pressure ulcers? Some technology we've developed in that space. How do you prevent jungle rot? And it's developing the next generation jungle boot. Programs like that, to include medical device development. We've worked with materials type solutions. There's there's almost nothing we haven't touched. And it just really, again, it goes back to making sure you've got the right people surrounding you.
Yeah. So the way I like to think of it when you kind of first spoke to you and I was trying to kind of understand, how to think of the core is somebody brings you an idea, and it's an idea or a concept that, is something that they've encountered within one of these high stakes sorts of situations, like typically life or death situations in a lot of cases. And they bring it to you. You have this engineering expertise to say, here are the type of people that we need to assemble to figure out this problem, and here's how we're going to refine this concept.
Right.
And so that's why I want to kind of get into this concept refinement specialist.
Yes.
Because that's how you describe your all's company on the website. So what does that mean to you in this role, in this context?
So we're going to march through. This is a classic engineering thing. So we have performance objectives. So that's what the customer comes to us with. It's like, I've got a great customer right now. Their patent has issued. They're in the process of commercializing their product. It's called Shepherd, and it's a part of your home security system or whatever. So right now we've got cameras, we've got glass break sensors, things like that. They've got a very unique technology that they're moving forward, and they come to me and say, "Hey, I don't like the idea that when I'm not home, if there was a fire, no one could protect my pet, or if I'm not there, no one could inform first responders." So they came to us with that idea. With that provides me with performance objectives. Okay, I need a system that does whatever. We do an initial assessment to say, okay, first off, do we buy into whatever this is? This isn't like we don't want every program that comes through. But we'll assess any idea that comes through. We're not chasing customers as much as it's relevant that we can deliver for them. So come to us with this idea. We look at it. We do kind of a cursory patent search, kind of a little market analysis. What tech is it going to take? What experts are we going to need? And this is probably the best program to highlight what kind of experts you need. In this scenario, we said, okay, you're right. There is a hole in this market space. Wow, this is a device that should be on the shelf right next to Ring and all these other things. But what's it going to take to get there? And then we help them. In some scenarios, their idea ends up morphing into what it actually becomes. But in this case, we needed a veterinarian. We needed a fire officer. We needed a policeman. We needed an electrical engineer. We needed a mechanical engineer. And so you build out this team, and that's what we bring together for the transition from performance objectives, to device requirements. And once you move into the device requirements stage, you may not need your veterinarian anymore, except for feedback or thoughts or things like that. So their contributions at that point may be reduced as you start handing it over to the technologists that say, well, you need to connect to this Internet of Things. We need to manage power. We need to have connectivity. We need compliance elements. And so you start defining and refining all those things. And then how do we answer the mail on each one of those things? You down select components, you test them, you combine them, you iterate. And that's really where the process follows it kind of a more traditional engineering pathway. But the whole time, we're working on something, or when we're considering taking something on, the goal is not to be a multiple year development effort. Now, I told you that technology had patented. It was patented. That means clearly it's been a couple years. We also can only move at the speed of the customer. So, there are funding elements and things like that. Whereas in a DoD type program, or where you're supporting an end user in that way, whether it be through a consulting capacity with someone who actually holds the program, or whether it's something we've taken on, our goal is to be able to deliver a tangible. In the last program, or the most recent program, 100 days to confirm viability. It's like there is a roadmap, and there is a genuine pathway forward to lock down the system architecture, transition to a design lock for the device, whatever that device is, and then start moving that out or spinning that out into a company that can produce this widget for acquisition. And that's what we're currently doing with one of our DoD programs.
And I think that brings up an interesting topic around this whole idea of refining a concept and then trying to get it to market, essentially, or get some intellectual property protection on an idea, getting a patent. Mm-hmm. How does that break down between the core and the customer that brings it to you? Mm-hmm. In terms of who owns what, who owns what sort of rights to the revenue it might produce? How does that all break down?
So managing expectations. So I consider that to be part of the upfront contract with the individual. if they want to partner in this effort, number one, we won't be executing on it if we weren't willing to partner. Okay, so again not looking to do work for hire as much as it is be a partner in their journey forward. Now, if we have that level of buy-in, we'd love to be part of it. But from an IP perspective, because we're helping co-develop the technology, typically the team ends up on the patents as well. And I think to date, we are batting 1,000. There's not one that I know of yet. I know we still have patents outstanding. We're batting 1,000 with any customer that's brought technology forth that has pursued a patent. Every single one has issued, which is crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
So some of them were in the patient transport platform community, head and neck restraint devices. This we'll call it a pet rescue or the home monitoring system, underground asset tracking. We've got 2 that are just issued on medical device development. We have another one for a secure DoD type security element that's still in the works. But every single patent that has been applied for with technology we've developed has issued, and I think that speaks to the fact that we work hard to vet the folks and the concepts that we believe in, meaning that it is unique and it's worth pursuing. That ultimately the customer is somewhat validated by the patent office saying, yep, this doesn't exist. Now, what they do with that's ultimately up to them. We have created partnerships with some of these folks as they march forward, but our stake in the game really is to kind of work with them in the way that they're comfortable, so.
Gotcha. So as it pertains to like the business model of the core, are you guys structuring the contracts where you can make residual income from the patent or from the development of the product, whatever it may be, into the future? Or is it like you guys have that contract to develop it and then it ends there? Like, what is it from a business model perspective?
Yep.
What does it look like?
So when we have external customers come in, I'd say we're game for anything. Sometimes it's pay for service. Great. Sometimes what happens is a customer will come in and typically the first pass is it's a small effort, $5,000 or whatnot, and really what that is to kind of get feel for what's out there in that space. And then we can develop, the bigger plan to move forward, and then the dollars associated with that are going to be obviously a little bit larger. However, when we see there's genuine opportunity for us to, potentially partner in this, we will see if we can negotiate our stake, whether it is part owner in the company, whether it is residual payback from licensing and things like that. But at the end of the day, I try not to push too hard on that, not because it's not a good potential revenue stream, because at the end of the day, we're solution providers, and we move very fast, and our attention span is that of a toddler. So it's like, we get a technology in, we want to get it developed, we want to provide that solution, and we're already looking at the next one, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it's much less than the inventor who that's their baby, and they want to take it all the way through its maturing process. We want to be that innovation partner when they find the second version, the third version that they want to go after, that we're the guy to come back to. So you're a partner in multiple ways. So you can feed the system by trying to put your hook in every technology that moves forward. We found that's not necessarily the best way to go, as much as it is just delivering a mail on any one innovation, such that you are the go-to guys because you're closest to that technology when they need to innovate.
It sounds like just a fun setup. You're constantly getting to work on something new, toy with new ideas. That just sounds like a generalist playground.
Yes. So let's take it back to that first responder world. You don't know what's going to happen. Like you're at the firehouse or whatnot, or you're in a cruiser, and all of a sudden a call comes across the radio or an alarm goes off in the firehouse. You don't know what's coming next. And that is part of the excitement of that job, and it's not always good stuff, but your job, the bad stuff happens independent of you. You have the ability to make an impact or make a difference once you get on scene. And that is the justification, that you go through in understanding, these people are relying on you to do your best to help make their situation better. In these type scenarios, it's not exactly the same, but it is absolutely the idea of you never know what's coming next. We didn't plan on getting an opportunity to develop the next generation Jungle Boot. field them out in the jungle to assess it. We didn't plan on helping defueling processes, developing equipment for them for the military, and end up in the Arctic Circle, but we did. So it's like there are just incredible opportunities that have come from this technology, from this approach. And the reality is, being able to be agile, being able to be to leverage diverse skill sets, and again, every individual that we work with. One of my partners, he describes it as a T-type personality, and I don't know by definition that that's exactly what it is, but from a technologist standpoint, it is folks that are broad in understanding and capabilities, and they're deep only in one or two different sections. So in his specific case, unfortunately for him, he's deep in a lot of different ways. So he's not a T-shaped person, but he can literally function from left to right with any technologist at literally any level. But then when we need him to deep dive in his areas of expertise, where I start to become weak, he is strong. Where he starts to become weak, I am strong, and that is really that overlap that we try to maintain with our team members.
Well, I think that's a great transition into this next part of the conversation I wanted to cover, which is how you assemble your teams to go after these ideas. So you have kind of a unique structure where you really leverage consultants and contractors.
Yes.
And it sounds like just a lot of, your relationships that you've formed through doing what you do. So talk about how you think about building an effective team to go after some of these ideas and to prove out some of these concepts.
Okay. So this is actually a really good question for right now, because this came up the other day, and my answer is as appropriate now as I think it was in that room. The difference with this team is the individuals are the type of folks that'll answer the phone at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night when things aren't going good at home or whatnot, because that's how much the customer matters. And when I say that, you had mentioned the word high stakes customers. We have high stakes customers. If they need something at 3 a.m. on a Saturday evening, it's because they're doing their job, and what they can't get done in that moment requires you. Now, most customers will not feel comfortable picking up the phone, giving you a call at 3 a.m, or having you sit on a Thursday night at midnight assessing information that you need to push out to them so that they may do mission changes, for their events the next day. It's like that's literally the seat we've sat in a few scenarios. You're not going to get a kid out of college that necessarily understands that level of commitment. It takes someone who has gone through the seasons of their career to understand that this is what I want to do. This is how I want to perform. This is who I am at my core, the CORE core. And how do you identify those folks? It's because those are the guys that will grind with you till 2 or 3 a.m, preparing technology that you're going to be hopping on a plane at 5 that same morning to fly to another state to get out untested, attempt to evaluate it, and then give it to your customer, and it's got to not fail. And that is a scenario from 2 weeks ago.
That sounds so relevant to, it makes me think of what Steve Jobs called the crazy ones, like the people who have the agency in the world to go out and make things actually happen in the real world. Like that's what it takes.
Yes.
If you want to actually go out and have a massive impact on something as high stakes as the customers you work with. Of course, there's a spectrum for entrepreneurs, but you have to have that passion. You have to have that drive. You have to have that commitment. If you want to take ideas, you want to take concepts and put them into the real world. Like that's just the energy and the commitment that it takes.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a very cool type of way to build a company. And for you, where has this just been kind of a culmination of your experience over the years of getting to know the right people to put in place? Or is it like a new experience every time you have a new idea come in? Like how consistent, I guess, are the people that you work with from project to project?
Yeah, pretty consistent. But we'll say talent begets talent. The folks that function and operate in this space also recognize other folks that operate and function in this space, and again, you start to create a network, but it's a network that you're not leaning on any one person too hard. And again, that goes back to that T-type description that I was saying, because we can collectively overlap when someone's dealing with challenges on other programs or stuff like that. Someone else can step in and fill their shoes. You can equate that to sports. The kind of the next man up, but it's not exactly that. And the other thing is that the stuff where the problems we're solving, this could be considered a big problem. We've got a big problem. well, what's the smallest piece of that big problem that we can solve? And as soon as you solve that, it's like, okay, what's next and what's next? So you're taking it one small bite at a time instead of trying to digest and consume the whole thing at once. And in that approach, that approach has led us to a point where we can deliver, this is going to sound horrible, a 20% solution, but we can deliver it right now and it makes an impact. And the second it makes an impact, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, what's the next step? And it's like, okay, what were the problems? And so a statement that I use, especially when we're fielding new technology or whatnot, is to hate it out loud. I don't need anybody to tell me how much they like it or it's the right color or whatever. I don't care about any of that. It's like, tell me what's wrong. And that really, I got to tell you, that comes from, again, go back to that first responder community. Very honest, very candid feedback. I don't have time to fool around with feelings or anything like that with regard to technology development, especially for these folks. It's like, just get to it. What don't you like? Well, it fits terrible. The screen's too big. We broke half of what you gave us. Wonderful. And then we look at, why did it break? Where did it fail? Because I can never get to the next best solution if you're being nice, and really you establish that rapport with your customers early on and they just get straight to the point.
I love that. And that's so valuable for an innovator to test and iterate. Like, give me that feedback. Tell me what broke about it. Let's figure out how we're going to iterate and make it better the next time. And then let's repeat that cycle the whole time. But that's such an important cycle to go through as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, as an inventor. But to kind of transition the conversation, and I want to talk some about the role that the state of Kentucky has played in helping you do what you do. So we talked a little bit about Kentucky Innovation and the SBIR grant and the role that that's played with the Corps. Just kind of in general, tell us about your experience and the role that that's played in your business.
Okay, so let's go back in time to the part-time engineering gig that I had years ago. The company I worked with was a strong SBIR company. Okay, they were able to capture a lot of programs. We developed a lot of technology. Really learned the ropes of this process. One of the key things that I did, or that I took away from that, was a lot of times the technology we would develop never ended up getting to the end user. Okay, it was leveraged to get other programs, and then at the end of the day, if priorities shifted, funding shifted, government shuts down, these programs just get killed, and all of a sudden everything ends up in a Rubbermaid tub up on a shelf in an archive. So I swore to myself, it's like, I'm never going into the cyber world unless we've got something that we can absolutely deliver on. And that's when this technology that we've pursued, presented itself. It's an airman innovation, worked itself up through their Spark cells, ultimately ended up in something called Dragon's Lair, which is an Army innovation competition. It won at Dragon's Lair. Early on, I helped consult to basically build out that device that went to Dragon's Lair. And with that, the Air Force elected to file a patent. The patent has issued. But ultimately, they needed somebody to take this thing forward into what's called a CSO, a commercial solutions offering. Take this thing, which isn't refined for anything, make it compliant, make it ruggedized, make it fieldable. And so it's like, that was the opportunity that we pursued with this SBIR. Wrote the proposal, submitted, selected unfunded. It's like, great. It said, we checked all the boxes, but we don't have money for you right now. However, anybody can fund this. And what ended up happening, this kind of the inventor, along with other people that truly believed in this concept, helped champion and push this thing through, where it got a few dollars put on it. And then the Army came in and put a few more dollars on it. And the Air Force came back in and put a few more dollars on it. So it's a partially funded SBIR, which some people would say, well, that's terrible. If anything, I view that as probably the best one. Somebody didn't just walk in blind and say, here, you're funded, go get it done. We've got again, I'll go to the words of grassroots effort. We've got people pushing for this in CENTCOM, in PACAF, and in the Tesseract team in Washington, D.C. It's like all these Air Force entities, the Army entities that want to see this thing move forward. And, finding funding is not always easy, but the funding that is being committed to this is genuinely intended to drive it to a final solution. And that's where we talk about that 100 days. 100 days in the program, from kickoff until briefing on the 100th day, we have locked in and defined the system architecture. What does that mean? 3 iterations or 3 fielded events of 3 different devices occurred in that 100 days in the Middle East. So we were able to physically build, ship, field, evaluate, iterate, and refield another device 3 times in 100 days. If we can't figure out at that point how to refine this down into something that can make an impact for the warfighter, it doesn't deserve more funding, and we're fine with that. However, it's proving that it is, and that's where the interest out in PACAF is, where that's starting to boil up, and I figured when we realized we were only partially funded, one of the key elements was, and I went back to the Army, I went back to the Air Force. It's like, listen, state of Kentucky has SBIR match funding. We're competing for. There is we'll call it a maximum threshold for each year. That's $150,000. We weren't funded to that point yet. The Army came through in a matter of hours, transitioning money to the Air Force to get that number up to the 150, such that the documentation was official, could be put in the hands of the Cabinet for Economic Development. I think that's who runs it now. Such that they executed within hours to get that full funding, get it all the way up to full funding match. So now a program that had nickels on it now had $300,000 on it. It had buy-in from the state of Kentucky, it had buy-in from the Army, had buy-in from the Air Force, and that solution was already in its from start to the second iteration being shipped out to the Middle East. That was only been 30 days. That's how fast everything was moving with no dollars on a contract. But this is because we believed that this is the right way to do it. And when I go backwards in time to what I had started this as, which was what the SBIR process historically was to me, we wanted to break the mold. We wanted to prove that you may not need all the funding to deliver a solution to the warfighter, and that you shouldn't be in this game if that's not your full intent. This is not where you just are going to chase dollars. You can, but that's not our mindset.
I love that. It's merit-based funding. It's saying, okay, hey, we're gonna actually show some progress and some real progress in order to get more funding on it. I think I think especially in like the startup scene, people lose sight of that, or at least they did in this like recent cycle we got out of where money was cheap and it was like VCs just tossing money at startups. That's the way things should go. It's like, test this idea. Okay, it worked. We're going to give you more funding.
Right.
But if you had to give like any advice or feedback to the entrepreneurs that are going out and trying to get SBIR funding, what would that be? Okay.
It would be, first off, this isn't for everybody. It's not an easy process. It is a ton of upfront work. And it's not something you're going to execute on a few weeks before the deadline. So you need to be pre-planning. You need to understand your customer and how your solution relates to your customer. Early identification of that customer and getting involved in that network and those folks is important. I know you can see a solicitation and say, wow, our technology is relevant for that. Well, early engagement is important, because if you don't really have a champion that understands you or knows who you are, you're just, you're a paper in the stack. And there's a lot of details in the submission process. No part of it's trivial. You're gonna invest an incredible amount of time to pursue something like this, and the win rate is, I think it's at like 10% or something like that. So again, batting 1,000. We've submitted one and we got one, and we didn't go for a phase 1. We went straight to a phase 2. So the phase 1s are typically, I don't know all the numbers now, but 75,000, 100,000, 150,000, depending on the service. And then, the phase 2s will get you up into like 7 figures or whatnot, and those are bigger development efforts. But to go direct to phase 2 means you've got a technology that's already been fielded in some way or field trialed. It's called a TRL, Technology Readiness Level 7. It has been evaluated in a relevant network, which in this case it was the solution fielded with people that were very hot on flight lines, and them saying, "Wow, this thing helps me thermoregulate or whatnot." So, but yeah, so that early engagement. The other thing I would say is network. Don't think that you have the best. Like no matter how good you think your company is, your partnerships are what really help you stand above others. So identify where you're weak and go find who's strong in that space. So if you're not good in the regulatory compliance space, go find a company or leverage a company you've used historically to ensure that you're checking that compliance box for the government. If you don't know how to do design for manufacturing and are not sure how to transition your ideas beyond that, so you're never going to have a real commercialization pathway, you need to network with folks that can help you get there. And whether it's somebody you bring in on your team, whether it's a partner that you're going to subcontract to, you're always going to have holes in your proposal because nobody can do everything. And it's identifying those, being honest about them, and then going and finding your superstar and getting in there. And not just a generic letter of support. It's a genuine engagement to move forward, because you can get letters of support from anybody. You truly want it to be a partnership.
You can tell you're very versed in the process of it. I think that's all great advice for an entrepreneur that might be thinking about going out and trying to get that sort of funding. But as we kind of wrap up the conversation, one of the purposes of this series of the podcast that we do is to kind of follow entrepreneurs along their journey and be able to revisit them in anywhere from 1 to 3 years into the future. And so with that in mind, what does success for the core look like to you? Like what do you hope to be talking about next time you come on this podcast?
Okay, so I'll equate that back to the toddler's attention span. Okay, so at the core, we'll still be doing the same thing, getting excited about a new project, executing on it, and wanting to forget it as soon as it's done and move on to the next one. Okay, so that's not going to change. However, we recognize, especially with this SIBR offering, I don't want to sell products, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, this needs to be an acquirable item, okay? So the methodology then would be to spin out a separate company that will hold, house, and move forward with the product-based distribution of this device to the DoD, while we, based on merit, are fully funded to refine this thing down to its full and final solution, which would be product number 2 for that company. So the idea is, at least in this scenario, start to create the first spinoff, okay? And I know people talk about that all the time. The whole point is, the DoD and the state of Kentucky are funding us to get to that point, and that is our genuine finish line. Now, if we only sell them to the individual end user, or only at the unit level, or maybe they end up on everybody that goes to boot camp in the hundreds of thousands a year, a product that scales within that organization, whatever it is that you've spun off, great, okay, great. But for us to deliver to our customer, when I say this, I don't envision that the core changes as much as it is that we create entities that can support the products that we create appropriately, because that's going to be like offspring. Parent organization got it. The children that all carry that same mindset and the same desire to deliver. However, their focus is theirs and theirs alone, which is going to be different, which is going to be more, we'll call it product based. However, they can always look back to us when they need innovation. So you're starting to create these spokes, okay, and these innovation opportunities to serve then those who have taken that and moved forward. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever have any like jetpacks or anything you need somebody to test out,
don't have any of those yet.
Let us know.
Have any of those yet.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about the core. It's been awesome talking with you and really diving into this very interesting company that you guys have going here. So until next time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you all enjoyed. Before signing off here, I just wanted to take a second to thank a lot of the people that make Middletech possible. So first off, I wanted to thank JP Blevins for letting us use his space to record. A big thank you to Jacob Spencer, our executive producer, and Lamaya Stearns for producing the episode and getting it out to all of you guys. And then a big thank you to TJ Barnett, Ethan Sharp, and Austin Short for producing all of our social content that goes out on our social channels. So just wanted to make sure that we're highlighting everyone that makes Middletech possible. It takes a lot of work to do what we do, and I wanted to make sure that everyone that plays a role in that is recognized and appreciated.